The old man entered in chains. The judge opened his file and couldn't hold back tears. Support this story by commenting respect, like the video, and subscribe for more heart-touching stories. It was a cold morning when the wooden doors of the courtroom creaked open. An old man walked in, his handcuffs giving off a faint jingle just loud enough for everyone to hear. His head was down, eyes fixed on the floor like he was trying to hide the battles still raging behind them. His hair was thin, his face worn down by time, but inside, there was still a soldier. The court clerk, following routine, asked, "Your name?" The man spoke softly, struggling with his words. "Mason Quinn, United States Marine Corps, Sergeant." The room, already quiet, fell into a deeper stillness. Nobody noticed at first, but a few minutes later, as the judge flipped through the case file, her hands suddenly froze. Her fingers trembled on the page. That name, Mason Quinn. He was the man who had saved her brother's life in Fallujah. On that mission, Judge Olivia Parker's brother, Lieutenant Jack Parker, had only made it back because of this man's courage. Now, Mason was 69. He wore a battered old jacket left over from his service days and sat hunched over on the courtroom bench. His clothes had been donated by a shelter, his hands were calloused, and he walked with a limp. The wounds from Vietnam and later, Iraq had never fully healed. Not on the outside, and definitely not on the inside. The bailiff called out, "Case 47B, City versus Mason Quinn, public disturbance, trespassing, resisting arrest." Mason stood. Every step he took carried the weight of everything he'd been through. The young prosecutor stood up next. He was polished, sharp suit, flawless smile, the kind of guy who rehearsed his lines. The defendant was repeatedly found behind Jefferson Street Cafe. The owner filed 3 complaints this month alone, he said, but he didn't mention the truth. Mason had never begged. He just sat near the cafe's back kitchen vent at night, trying to stay warm. That's all. Just a few minutes of heat so he wouldn't freeze. Then Officer James Reynolds took the stand. At 11:45 p.m., we found the defendant behind the cafe. We asked him to leave. He refused. But all Mason had said was, "Let me finish my sandwich and I'll go." A cook named Jimmy had quietly given him that sandwich. But at this point, no one seemed to care about the full story. "This is his 3rd violation this year," the prosecutor added. "We're requesting community service and a ban from the city center." But that ban would mean Mason couldn't return to the only shelter he had. He'd lose access to hot meals at St. Luke's Church. Basically, they'd be cutting him off from the only places keeping him alive. Judge Olivia Parker looked up. "Mr. Quinn, do you have legal representation?" Mason shook his head. His public defender had been reassigned. He was alone. "Would you like to represent yourself?" she asked. Mason cleared his throat. "I've got no excuse, Your Honor. I'm just trying to stay warm." "Why that particular cafe?" she asked. He paused. "Jimmy, the cook. His dad and I served together in the Gulf. He's looked out for me ever since." "And your military background?" she asked, something rarely brought up in cases like this. "Marine Corps. Served from 75 to 95. 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines. I did a tour in Iraq." The words came like muscle memory etched in by years of service. The judge's eyes caught something in the file. She frowned but didn't say anything because just then, the courtroom doors opened again. A man walked in wearing an expensive suit, confident and calm. "Your Honor, Alexander Rossi. I'm here to represent the defendant. Sorry for the late notice, I only just got word of the case." Mason blinked in disbelief. He didn't have a lawyer, especially not someone who looked like that. "This is highly irregular," the judge said. "We weren't notified of this representation." Rossi gave a polite nod. "It's a new development, Your Honor. If I may, I'd like a short recess to speak with my client." Judge Olivia looked over at Mason, then slowly closed the file. "Court is in recess for 15 minutes. As the room emptied, Mason leaned in and whispered, "I don't have any money." Rossi replied quietly, "You won't need any. The firm of Williams, Rossi and Parker is handling this pro bono." Mason flinched at the name. "Parker, same as the judge?" "Yes," Rossi said softly. "Same Parker. That's why this case is personal." When Judge Olivia Parker stepped into her chambers, the calm, collected expression she wore on the bench was already gone. For 20 years, she'd sat behind that bench with unwavering authority, but now, her hands trembled as she pulled off her glasses. She'd grown used to files, lies, crimes, and tears, But nothing had prepared her for the name that shattered all her defenses today. "This can't be," she whispered. But the details in the case file matched the memories perfectly. She opened a drawer and pulled out an old, yellowed photograph. And it was a young man, her brother, Jack Parker. He wore his Marine uniform, smiling with his arm wrapped around a younger Olivia. Beneath the photo was a letter. Jack's last letter, sent right after the battle in Fallujah. With shaking hands, she opened it once more. The lines were still clear. "My life was saved today by a Marine. His name is Sergeant Mason Quinn. He ran into open fire to drag a wounded man to safety. Then he took position to cover us. If it wasn't for him, none of us would have made it back." At the end, Jack had written, "If I ever find that man again, I won't just thank him. I'll make sure he knows he has family in Jack Parker's name." Mason Quinn was that man, the one who'd saved her brother in a blaze of gunfire, who vanished into the chaos of war, who now, decades later, slept in a shelter, clinging to life behind a cafe kitchen for warmth. A knock on the door. Alexander Rossi stepped in, wearing an expression that mixed concern and urgency. "Olivia, what's going on?" Rossi, an old family friend and former partner of Olivia's late husband, was one of the few people still allowed to call her by her first name. She didn't take her eyes off the photo. "Alex, that man, he's the one we've been looking for. The one who saved Jack." Rossi pressed his lips together. "Are you sure?" "Completely. The letter, the records, the dates, even the mission location. They all match. Even the Silver Star mentioned was from that same operation." "Does he know who you are?" "I don't think so. I changed my last name when I got married. He only knows me as Parker. Right now, I'm a stranger to him." Olivia buried her face in her hands. "Alex, how does a man like that end up on the streets? How does no one recognize him? How does no one help?" Rossi cleared his throat. "We only spoke briefly, but he's dealing with severe PTSD. His wife left him while he was deployed. His VA paperwork got lost. He worked construction for a while, but age and injuries made it impossible. Then came the foreclosures, the unemployment, and the streets. I searched for him for 20 years, Olivia whispered. I asked everyone. They said he was retired, but no one knew where he'd gone. And now, he's sitting in my courtroom, in handcuffs." The room was silent. Olivia looked back at her brother's letter. "Quinn isn't just a soldier. He's the kind of man I've tried to live up to. If I could be even half the person he is, that would be enough." She closed her eyes, took a breath, and then looked at Rossi. "You know what I'm going to do, right? I'm not letting him disappear again. Not this time." "Olivia, the ethics dash, I know," she cut him off. "But some cases are more than what's written in the law books. And this is one of them." 15 minutes later, Judge Parker walked back into the courtroom. But this time, she wasn't alone. Behind her marched 3 uniformed officers, a colonel, a master sergeant, and a young corporal carrying a polished wooden box. Whispers rippled through the courtroom. No one could make sense of what was happening. Mason Quinn stood slowly, like his old training had kicked in on instinct. Olivia returned to the bench, this time without her glasses. Her voice was soft, but firm. "Before we continue the hearing, I need to say something. The Lieutenant Mason mentioned earlier Jack Parker was my brother." Gasps. Silence. 20 years ago, Jack sent us a letter. He wrote about a Marine who ran through gunfire to save him. That man asked for nothing in return. But that name, I never forgot it. Sergeant Mason Quinn. From the back of the room, an older man stood up. His silver hair gleamed, a Marine badge on his coat. "That's right," he shouted. "I was there too. Quinn saved us. Took 2 bullets and never backed down." Judge Parker gently lowered her gavel. "In this courtroom, we don't just follow the law. We honor humanity." She leaned back, her eyes locked on Mason. "Mr. Quinn, we have more to talk about. But first, something needs to be returned." Colonel James Matthews stepped forward. "Mr. Quinn, the Marine Corps has been searching for you. Records from Fallujah were recently updated with new intel. Your Silver Star," the young corporal opened the wooden box, "has been upgraded to the Navy Cross." A wave of stunned gasps swept through the room, then silence. The kind that only respect could bring. Mason stared at the medal, his voice breaking. This must be a mistake. I was just doing my job." The colonel shook his head. "No, Sergeant. This honor is long overdue." Then someone shouted, "Attention!" One by one, veterans in the courtroom stood dressed in civilian clothes, but wearing the posture of soldiers. A quiet, powerful salute filled the room. And slowly, Mason Quinn, his shoulders once heavy with defeat, stood tall again. Judge Parker struck her gavel one final time. All charges are hereby permanently dismissed. When the hearing ended, the courtroom was still on its feet. Some people were quietly wiping tears. Others approached Mason Quinn and gave him small, respectful nods. Mason, though, seemed deaf to all the noise around him. He stood in the center of the room, eyes fixed on the floor, listening only to the echoes inside his own mind. This was unfamiliar territory. Being honored, being seen, being respected. The invisibility that had clung to him for years felt like it was finally starting to lift. Colonel Matthews walked over to Mason. He pulled a tablet from his coat and opened a file. "Mr. Quinn," he said, his voice firm but kind, "we reviewed your VA status. Your retirement has been reclassified, 100% service-connected." Mason blinked, trying to understand. What does that mean?" The colonel explained patiently. "It means you're now eligible for full medical benefits, back pay, housing, and support programs. Even the option to go back to school." For the first time in years, Mason struggled to find the words. I was just trying to stay warm," he murmured. Just then, a young man stepped forward. He was wearing a cook's apron, his eyes red but smiling. "Mr. Quinn, I'm Jimmy. You might remember me. I used to sneak you food from the kitchen sometimes. But there's something I need to say. My dad, he always told me he fought alongside a man named Mason Quinn during the Gulf War. He used to say, if a man named Mason Quinn ever crosses your path, drop everything and help him. I guess I just want to say thank you. I know I'm late." Mason's eyes were distant, but something inside him was starting to soften. He slowly reached out his hand. "Your dad was a good man, brave." Across the courtroom, the young prosecutor approached. There was no smugness now, no legal arrogance. Just a humbled man. "Mr. Quinn, we learned a lot today. We judged too quickly, without knowing the full story. This case, it taught me something. Please, accept my apology." Mason simply nodded. He'd heard far too many cold silences over the years. These few words, they felt like water on a tree long left to dry. As the room began to empty, Olivia Parker stepped down from the bench. This time, not as a judge, but simply as a sister. She stopped in front of him. "Sergeant Quinn," she said gently. "I'm Olivia, Jack's sister." Mason's eyes lit up. That name, like a ghost pulled straight from his past, hit him hard. "Jack," he whispered. "He was a good kid. Even when he was wounded, he told me, help the others first. I made him a promise. I wasn't going to leave him behind. And I didn't." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes, but her voice didn't shake. "And because of that, you're still here. But Mason, we forgot you. The world forgot you. But Jack didn't. In his letters, he said he wanted to be like you. A leader, a soldier, a man." Mason's lips quivered. Those words, they reached places in him that had long gone quiet. "I was just doing my job," he said softly. "But all these years I've wondered, what if saving him only led to more pain? What if I just delayed the inevitable? What if I failed him by saving him?" Olivia gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "No, Jack lived 2 more weeks because of you. And in those 2 weeks, he wrote his last letter. He said goodbye to our family. He wrote about courage, not fear. And he said he was proud of you. That letter, it's the reason I found you today." Mason took a small step back, leaning against the wall. The question that had haunted him for decades finally had an answer. "So, it meant something," he said. "That night, getting shot, carrying him through the fire. It all meant something." Olivia nodded. "It meant more than you'll ever know. Today, because of you, justice was reborn in this courtroom. But more importantly, a man was finally remembered." Mason pressed the letter to his chest. He didn't speak for a long time. His breathing grew heavier. Olivia stood in silence, watching him. And in that quiet moment, she realized sometimes a man doesn't just need saving in war. He needs saving after it, too. "It's because of you that I became a judge," Olivia finally said. "Jack's letters showed me that justice doesn't just live in law books, it lives in people. That's why, after I passed the bar, I pushed to create a special court just for veterans. Today, because of that program, so many former soldiers are finally getting help. But it all started with your story." Mason looked up, and for the first time, there was something soft but honest in his face. "All those years, it felt like everyone forgot my name, like I never really existed. We didn't forget your name. Olivia said gently. We just couldn't find you. She paused, then added, But Mason, you're not alone anymore. Your past shaped you, yes. But what defines you is that you're still standing here today. Mason turned to look out the window. Outside, the snow had begun to fall again. Soft, white, quiet like a blanket, trying to cover everything, trying to cleanse it all. Sometimes a man doesn't die in war, he said quietly. He dies when he's forgotten. You remembering me kept me alive. Olivia smiled. And thanks to you, I remembered Jack one more time. As winter blanketed the silence with snow, Mason Quinn's life began to take a very different shape. Everything moved slowly now, but that slowness felt like something sacred. It wasn't about battle anymore. It was about rebuilding, a quiet kind of resurrection. These days, when he woke up, he didn't reach for cardboard scraps on the sidewalk. Instead, he sat at a simple kitchen table, sipping coffee. And every weekend, he'd find himself at a small neighborhood park surrounded by people he barely knew, quietly and patiently trying to become part of society again. He'd started volunteering at the local Veterans Association. At first, he just came and went without speaking. But over time, the looks from other vetsmen who'd also seen too much and then been forgotten began to turn into silent invitations. They started to gather near him. Listen, lean in. And among them, there was a younger generation and new wave of veterans, not lost in war, but drifting on the edges of life. One day, during a small community meeting in a church hall, a young man stood up. He was fresh out of service. His eyes were full of anger and disappointment. They ask so much from us, he shouted. And then just forget we exist? What changes the minute the job's done? When they forget us, who are we supposed to be? Mason slowly stood from his chair. His knees didn't move like they used to, but his voice still carried weight. They might forget, he said, but we don't. We didn't leave each other behind out there. And we're not leaving each other now in the streets, in the silence, in the shame. That day, for the first time, people began to gather around Mason. They listened to his story not to honor him, but to survive, to find direction. He was no longer a ghost from the past. He was a guide for the present. That evening, Olivia Parker was in the crowd too, sitting quietly in the back, not as a judge, just as a person. After the meeting, she approached Mason, who was still standing by the wall. They locked eyes. For a long time, no one said my name out loud. Mason told her. Now, people say it like it matters. It's strange. Olivia smiled. Your name used to just sit on top of a court file. Now, it lives in people's minds, in their hope. Mason nodded slowly. There are so many like me, not just the ones in handcuffs, but the forgotten, the quiet ones. I just became visible, but they're still out there invisible, still silent. And that's why we found you, Mason, Olivia said. Because this time, you're not the one being saved. You're the one doing the saving. Not long after that night, Olivia pushed through a proposal and Mason was officially offered a role in a city-sponsored support program. Veteran advisor. Not just a man with paperwork, but a man with purpose. Someone who could speak with his eyes, not just his words. Someone the shelters and the courtrooms needed. One morning, at a city event, a small space was unveiled, the Mason Quinn Veterans Resource Room. On the wall was a replica of his Navy Cross medal, and beneath it, these words were engraved. No soldier should be forgotten for the courage they show when no one is watching. Mason stood before it for a long time. He placed his hand on the wall, and in that reflection, he didn't just see himself. He saw Jack Parker. He saw Jimmy's father. He saw the friends who froze on the streets. And then, he saw his own face again, one he could finally recognize. It was March. The cold was slowly retreating, replaced by the smell of fresh soil and the first hints of green on the tree branches. That morning, Mason Quinn stood in front of the mirror, holding his old military jacket just like he did every day. It didn't fit him anymore, but he still folded it carefully and laid it over a chair with quiet respect. It wasn't a habit. It was a reminder that he had survived, and that surviving takes courage too. The apartment provided by the Veterans Housing Program was still modest, but now the walls held more than medals. They carried pieces of the life Mason had rebuilt, a thank you card written in the shaky hand of a young soldier, a pencil sketch gifted by an old man Mason had once met on the streets, and a photo Olivia had sent him, the last one ever taken of her brother Jack, in full uniform. That morning, there was a knock on the door. Olivia stood there, holding a delicate envelope. When Mason opened the door, they both smiled. This time, they weren't a judge and a veteran. Just two people connected by a past they never chose, but never forgot. "I brought you something," Olivia said, handing him the envelope. Inside was an invitation to the National Veterans Honor Evening. Mason's name was written in gold lettering, Guest of Honor. "Me?" Mason asked softly. Olivia lowered her eyes and nodded. "Yes, because you're no longer just a symbol of the past. You're a part of today." When the evening came, Mason walked into a large hall for the first time in years. His steps were slow but steady. When they called him to the stage, he stood tall. As the applause echoed around him, he stepped up to the microphone. All eyes were on him. His voice was soft, but steady and deep. "I was just doing my duty," he began. "But I've learned something: duty doesn't end on the battlefield. The real fight begins after the war ends." His eyes found Olivia's in the crowd. Some people come into your life like a late spring. They remind you. They give your name back to you. And sometimes, a soldier isn't just wounded by bullets. He's wounded by being forgotten. But when someone remembers, healing begins. The applause rose again. And for a moment, Mason closed his eyes. He saw Jack Parker's face, the young lieutenant on that dusty road, shouting through pain, "Leave me, save the others." But what Mason heard now wasn't Jack's voice, it was the words from his last letter. "If I can be anything like you, then I'll know I was a good officer." At the end of the night, Olivia came up beside him. "How did it feel?" she asked. Mason stayed quiet for a long moment. Then slowly he smiled. "After all these years," he said, "someone said my name. Not just to call me, but to remember me. And I think, for the first time, I felt truly alive." That night, as he walked back to his apartment, Mason looked up at the sky. The stars were silent but close. And for the first time in his life, he believed. No one was truly left behind. He was no longer just a soldier. He was a story. And this story would not be forgotten. Support this story by commenting respect, like the video, and subscribe for more heart-touching stories.